Okay, today's lesson's on circle and line graphs. Um, Basically, we're just going to look at what each one is used for and then constructing them. The line graph we've been doing in the last chapter. We did line plot or scatter plots, and then we graphed functions, graphed lines, linear equations. Line graphs pretty much the same thing, so that should be pretty easy. The circle graphs, those are, I know you've seen them before, but you've never made one before. That's going to be something new, but it's just a combination of some things you have done in the past, so it shouldn't be too bad. But first thing here, basically, we just need to remember that a circle graph, we use that when we want to break data into parts of the whole thing, where a line graph is used to display data over time. So those are the basic uses of each. And we're going to start by looking at a line graph. So this one is just showing you different heights of, if you know, maybe it's a plant that somebody planted and is checking how tall it's growing. And so they check every 3 months to see what the height is, and they recorded this down. And so this is definitely over time, so that means we're going to use a line graph. So when we set this up, we're going to put the months, because that's our input. We're going to put that along the bottom of the graph. So we'll come down here and make sure we label this as months down here. And then since it does go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, the easiest is just going to be to count by threes. So we'll start right here, and remember, I always skip every other line, just to make it look a little bit neater. And we just need to go out. 18 is the highest one, so I'll just stop at 21 there. And then we'll put the height on the side here. So we will label that, and then we will count. Probably we gotta get up to 40. It's just gonna be count by fives here. So again, and just label every other one. So it actually looks like I'm counting by tens, but then the lines that are not labeled are the other fives. So that's all labeled, and we should always title this. So I said, we think of this as being the height of a plant. So we'll just title it that, height of a plant. And then we just go ahead and graph the points on here. So the first point's going to be 3, 15. So I go over to 3, go up to 15, put a point there. Next one's 621. So that's going to be just past the 20 on the y-axis. 925 will be right at the corner there. 1230 is also going to be right in the corner. That one worked out perfectly. 1537, that'll be about halfway between 35 and 40. And then 1840, that'll be right in the corner. And then it is a line graph, so we're going to connect these with line segments. It's not going to make a perfectly straight line here, so just go pretty much from dot to dot, and connect them, and that's your line graph. So like I said, we've done the scatter plots just last chapter. We did graphing linear equations as well. It's pretty much the same thing. They're all just put your points on the graph and connect them. So that's a pretty easy one. Before we do the circle graphs, we're going to review real quick how to measure angles, because you got to be able to measure the angle correctly if you're going to create a circle graph. You need to be able to measure angles out. So remember, we use our protractor for that. Remember, when you're using your protractor, you always got to be paying attention. Where is the bottom of the angle going to sit? Does it sit across the bottom of the protractor? Is there a mark up higher? And on this one, it doesn't sit quite across the bottom. There's that line that goes through it. And you always want to make sure you have the vertex of the angle in the right spot. And then this bottom of the angle is coming right through the 0 degrees, so that looks good. And then you just look for what line it goes through. Now, we always have two choices here. This angle is either somewhere between 50 and 60, or between 120 and 130. Now, obviously, it's an acute angle, which means it's less than 90 degrees. So we do expect it, knowing that it's going to be less than 90, well, if it's either between 120 and 130 or 50 and 60, I know it's got to be between 50 and 60. And so this is 50 exactly. That would be 55. So this next one's got to be 56. So this angle is 56 degrees. Okay, then we can do the one down here as well. Let's take my protractor down here. Now this angle is opening the opposite way. The bottom of the angle points to the left. Again, I'm going to make sure I get the vertex in the corner, right at the right spot on the protractor, and make sure the bottom of the angle is going right through the 0. Now this is obviously an obtuse angle, so I know it's got to be between 90 and 180. So my choices look like either 30 or 150. So since I know it's between 90 and 180, that's an easy choice. I know it's going to be the 150. So I know this angle is 150 degrees. So just a quick review there on using a protractor. Now we're going to use it to make a circle graph. So we have a problem here. It says 100 people are surveyed and asked how many televisions they have in their house, and 9 people say they have 1 television. 63 people say they have 2 in their house, and 28 people say that they have more than 2 televisions. So we're going to use this. These are the 100 people would be the whole group, and we're going to break it into the parts. The parts that say they have 1 television, the parts that say they have 2, and the parts that say they have more than 2. So this is a perfect time to use a circle graph. So if I'm going to make a circle graph, I don't just make up the size of the sections in the circle. I've got to know exactly how big they're supposed to be. Okay? So I have a circle down here ready to make my graph on, and notice I already have the protractor there because I needed a specific size for each section. It's not just, well, I know, the one's only 9, so I'll make that one kind of small. The one was 63, so I'll make that one really big. It's got to be a specific size. So the way we figure out that specific size is we use proportions. Okay? Now, we know that every circle has 360 degrees in it. And so what we're trying to find is, for each section, how many degrees of the 360 in the circle should that section contain. And so on the other side, the way I'm going to figure that out is I know up here for 1 television that 9 people said they have 1 television, and it's 9 out of the 100. So what I do is set up a proportion that's 9 out of 100 is equal to how many degrees, or x, out of the 360 in the circle. And so I can solve this proportion to figure out how big to make each section. I believe we did some proportions last year, and the way you solve those is by cross multiplying and then dividing. And so I start by cross multiplying, means I'm going to do 360 times 9. When I do that, I should end up with 3,240. So I'll put that down here, 3,240. And then I divide that by the denominator over here. So divide that by 100, and you'll end up with 32.4. So that is how many degrees we're going to make that section of the circle. Now, On the protractor, we can only go to the nearest degree, so we are going to round this off to 32 degrees. Okay? Then I'm going to do similar thing to figure out how big I should make the section with 2 televisions. Now on this one, it was 63 people out of the 100. And I want to know how many degrees out of the 360 that should be. But again, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to cross multiply, do 360 by 63. When I do that, I end up with 22,680. And then again, I need to divide that by the 100. Divide that by 100, and you should get 226.8. And then we'll round that off to the whole number, since we want it. We're going to use our protractor, which only goes to whole degrees. And so we'll make that section of the circle about 200, or we'll make it exactly 227 degrees. So then the last one, more than 2, there were 28 people. So same proportion, 28 out of the 100, the whole group. And we want to know how many degrees is that going to take up out of the 360 in the circle. And so again, I'm just going to cross multiply. So I do 360 times 28, which is going to give me 10,080. And then divide that by the 100. And of course that's just going to give me 100.8. So I will round that off and make that section 101 degrees. Now, before I actually go and construct the circle graph though, I'm going to make sure that I did these right. We already said we know the circle's got 360 degrees, so we can check this by saying, okay, let me look at the 3 answers I got, the 32, the 27, 227, and the 101, and make sure that they total up to 360. So that gives me 328 when I add those two together. Another 2 makes it 330, and the 30 makes it 360. So that looks good. I do have 360 degrees, so this should work out right then. Looks like I didn't make any mistakes. So I'm going to take my protractor to start the circle graph. What I need to do is put a radius in. Okay? You can put it anywhere you want. And you're just going to use the bottom of the protractor to line it up to make sure it's straight. And I construct a radius. Okay, so that's easy. Now I'm going to line up my protractor as if the radius is the bottom of my angle. And then I'm going to mark how big the angle should be. So I'm going to start with the smallest angle. I start with the smallest because those are easier. Sometimes you can get angles like 227. This protractor only goes up to 180 degrees. So I can't do an angle that's 227. But if I do the 32 degree angle and the 101 degree angle, which I can easily do on my protractor, what's left in the circle should be 227, because I know that they add up to the 360 in the circle. So I always start with the smallest ones, and then what's left over will be the big one. So I'm going to go and do the 32 degree first. So I'm going to find 30. Let's follow it out. 2 more over. Now I'm just going to make a little mark right there. Okay? Then, once I have my mark, now I go back and I use my protractor as a straight edge. And I line the protractor up, the bottom of the protractor, where I want my line to go here. And then I just draw a line. It's going to be another radius from the center to the edge of the circle on that line that's going to connect to that mark I made. So I know now this section here is going to be 32 degrees. So now my next angle is going to be, I'm going to do the 101 degree, and I'm just going to start that from where I have this new radius I just made. So I have this new radius is going to be the bottom of my angle. So I'm going to set the protractor up along there. And then I'm going to measure out to 101 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and make my mark there again. So here's 100. Go out one more. Make a little mark. Then I'm just going to turn my protractor. And again, use the bottom of my protractor as my straight edge. And then I can connect these. And that'll be my section that is exactly 101 degrees. And then, like I said, that section that's left over, this big part in here, would have to be 227 degrees. And so I go ahead and I need to make sure that I label each section. The one that was 32 degrees came from the people that said they had one TV in their house. So I would label this section over here as one TV. Then the section with there was 101 degrees, that was the people who said they have more than two TVs in their house. Again, it just come in right in the circle, and I just label this section as more than two. And then the big section down here is those that had exactly two TVs. So I'll label that as two TVs. Remember, you do always need a title, so I would title this something like number of TVs in the house. And there's my circle graph. So once I know how big the angles are, it's easy. I construct a radius anywhere I want, measure out the degrees with my protractor to the smallest angle, make that side of the angle, then use that as my new beginning spot. That's the bottom. Measure out the next smallest angle, put a mark, connect it with the bottom of the protractor, and the biggest section will be left over. That's how you construct the circle graph.